A shooting at a Catholic school in Minneapolis during a celebration of Mass leaves 2 young children dead and 17 injured. We have reporting from the scene on the victims, what officials know, and where the investigation goes from here. Violence in cities. We talked to one Midwestern mayor about how to possibly prepare for such a tragedy. And survivors. We'll speak to one woman who lived through the 2018 mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, on the long-lasting impact. Hello, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in for Major Garrett. Welcome to the Takeout. We come on the air tonight with what is unfortunately an all too familiar headline: another mass shooting in America, this time at a Catholic school in Minneapolis, Minnesota. As students and faculty gathered for Mass to celebrate the start of a new school year, a shooter opened fire in a church, targeting the victims while they prayed. 2 children, ages 8 and 10, were killed as they sat in their pews. 17 other people, 14 of them children, were also injured, and 2 are in critical condition. The shooter is also dead. Like so many of these tragedies, key eyewitness accounts today came from children. You can hear the tenderness in their voices as they describe the undescribable. Friends, schoolmates being shot. Take a listen to Weston Halsney, a 5th grader at Annunciation Catholic School.
It was like the shots fired, and then we kind of like got under the pews. It kind of, they shot through the stained glass windows, I think, and it was really scary.
What did you do after that?
Well, we waited like 10 to 5 minutes, I don't really know, and then we went to the gym, and then the doors locked just to make sure he didn't come. And we waited in the gym for more news, and everyone was okay. Or most people were okay.
Who were your friend, Wes?
My friend got hit in the back.
Did he go to the hospital?
Yeah, he went to the hospital.
What went through your mind when you saw that?
I was super scared for him, but I think now he's okay.
My friend got hit in the back is not something we should hear a 10-year-old say as he stands outside his school and place of worship. On this, anyone would agree. And yet, children across the country head back to school this season knowing what happened in Minnesota could happen anywhere, because it has happened everywhere. You don't have to have children to feel a chill up your spine when you see this headline today or any other day. You just have to be human. And for parents preparing to send their kids to school or to church or anywhere really, that chill is especially acute. My 4-year-old son starts preschool here in Washington tomorrow. At a school open house last year, a fellow parent asked about the school's active shooter drills. No one, including myself, batted an eye. It was as if he just had asked where the water fountain was. This is not a political statement. It's simply an observation of reality. And the hurt those families are feeling in Minnesota weighs heavily on us all tonight. And that's where we want to turn now to CBS News correspondent Usher Corbasi. He's in Minneapolis. I want to play a little bit of what Mayor Jacob Frey said earlier today. Let's take a listen.
They should be playing on the playground. They should be able to go to school or church in peace without the fear or risk of violence, and their parents should have the same kind of assurance. These are the sort of basic assurances that every family should have, every step of the day, regardless of where they are in our country.
Usher, I know you're on the scene there, and thank you for all of your reporting. Tell us what you're learning about this morning's tragic events at Annunciation Catholic School.
Well, Caitlin, as you mentioned, these students were just returning to school. They started classes on Monday. Lots of beautiful photographs have been posted to their Instagram page this week about returning to school. This morning, as you mentioned, they were at a Mass, and police tell us that just before 8:30, they responded to this shooting. What we understand from that shooting is that as these children were sitting in the pews in that Mass, the shooter came up on the side of the building and began shooting through the window, firing dozens of rounds from guns that the shooter had. And we understand that there was a rifle, a shotgun, as well as a pistol that was used in this shooting. We're also told that before the shooter began this shooting, a 2x4 was used to block one of the two entrances to the school as these children were sitting down in mass and praying ahead of this new school year, Caitlin.
There's so many details that are so disturbing. It was really interesting to hear from Senator Amy Klobuchar today, because she confirmed that she actually had a staffer whose kids were at the scene of that shooting. Let's take a listen to what she told CBS News Minnesota.
Her daughter, Cora, and two other children were in there. There were so many families. The kids were packed into the church because it's the beginning of school. It's the all-school mass. It's little kids. Imagine, preschool to 8th grade. Her daughter was one of the older ones, literally witnessed several of her friends shot in the stomach, in the neck. Once they got out, she personally told one of the dads of one of the friends that had been shot that her friend had been shot.
We know that 2 children were killed. What else can you tell us about those 17 others who were injured?
Right, we're hearing at this point that number has risen to 19, as we understand it. Authorities say there were a total of 19 victims in the shooting, including 2 children, as you mentioned, who died at the scene. Those 2 children were between the ages of 8 and 10. They were pronounced dead on the scene. Now, the vast majority of the victims in this shooting were children, 14 injured, between the ages of 6 and 15, and there were 3 adults also shot in their 80s. In addition, police say that the suspect died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
And Usher, because you're on the scene there in this community, can you just give us a sense of what it feels like right now to be on the ground?
It's chilling. It's, as you mentioned, so many of us are parents and we have children who are going back to school, and we're not thinking about this kind of event happening in our schools. But as you mentioned, it is far too common. It is something that has shocked this community. The city of Minneapolis, as we know, over the last few years has been dealing with tragedy after tragedy, from the George Floyd murder to what's happening here today. And a lot of parents just feeling like, what's next? And we understand that the community is coming together. There's a vigil tonight that is scheduled for about 8 p.m. local time here, where they will be talking about what's happened here, trying to push forward as they try to heal from this latest tragedy, Caitlin.
A lot of healing left to do. Usher, thank you so much for your time and reporting. We appreciate it. And my colleagues Scott McFarland and Samantha Vinograd join me now at the desk. Scott, I want to start with you because we know this is now being investigated as a hate crime. What more do we know about the investigation here?
FBI is leading the investigation, no surprise there. But this is a 23-year-old shooter who has connective tissue to the school and whose mother has connective tissue to the school, which is so often the case in these mass shootings. According to law enforcement officials and court records reviewed by CBS News, Robin Westman, 23 years old, was a graduate of this Annunciation School about 8 years ago. His mother retired as an employee of Annunciation School a few years ago. And what law enforcement try to get after here is the writings that they believe are connected to Westman, a YouTube video, which appears to have been timed to populate today, that may give some indication as to motives and belief systems for Robin Westman. But I think more fundamentally, and Sam can speak to this better than me, when you have mass shooting investigations so often, there is a pattern of some type of writings, some type of extremist beliefs, some type of extremist information consumption. I think police are trying to get after that tonight.
And you mentioned the weapons as well. What do we know about what was found on the scene?
At least 3 weapons, 3 firearms, each of which, according to the police chief, were fired as part of this. They also found some type of smoking device to create a smoke cloud, not an explosive. That was found on site, as well as a car that Westman appears to have driven to get to the church and to the school area today. These are all components of an investigation, and these investigations are often complicated when the suspect, the shooter, dies by suicide. We certainly saw that in July 2024 in Butler, Pennsylvania.
Scott, thank you so much for your reporting. We know you'll stay on this. We really appreciate it. Sam, I want to talk to you, kind of picking up what Scott was saying, because the shooter is dead. What does that mean for the investigation going forward, trying to glean any information about motive, about potentially other targets? How does one operate in that circumstance?
Well, despite the fact that the shooter is deceased, the investigation will continue full force ahead. The FBI is investigating this as a hate crime. A hate crime is a criminal act motivated by bias of some kind, including bias against a particular religion. What we already know is this was not a spontaneous event, Caitlin. This attack was methodically planned over a period of time, and investigators are going to want to understand how this individual was able to stockpile weapons lawfully, as far as we know, write manifestos, make social media posts without anybody picking up on what was happening and asking for help, whether from law enforcement or mental health professionals. The goal here is to understand whether this individual had accomplices and whether there were warning signs that were missed or ignored that could have prevented this from happening. The shooter is deceased, but there are many other individuals that investigators will be talking to, including family members, friends, individuals the shooter interacted with, and more.
And especially, as Scott mentioned, the shooter had connections to the school. The mother worked at the school and the like. You mentioned that they're investigating this as a hate crime. How, if at all, does that change the nature of this kind of investigation?
Well, the fact that they're investigating it as a hate crime really means which part of the FBI and which FBI agents are going to be working on the investigation itself. I do want to make a key point, though, because there's a lot of misinformation circulating right now. This individual, as far as we know, did identify as transgender. However, as we look at the spectrum of mass casualty events in our nation's history, there have been a range of motivations and a range of profiles that have been associated with mass casualty events. You look at the shooting in Charleston at a historically black church in 2015. That was perpetrated by a white supremacist based on racial bias. There was a shooting in Texas in 2017 in Sugar Land that was motivated by personal hostility and a personal grievance. So as investigators are investigating this as a hate crime, they're going to be reviewing the individual's bias towards Catholicism, potentially personal ties, as Scott laid out, and a range of other potential motivations. But there's no single profile of mass shooters in this country.
And if you are a citizen of Minneapolis, if you are trying to kind of go about your day, what might you expect in terms of seeing the investigation around perhaps a heavier presence of law enforcement, FBI, other types of officials?
We should expect to see a heavy law enforcement presence from federal officials, including the FBI, ATF, and others on the ground in the area where the individual had residences, vehicle, where this individual may have worked for some time. They want to get eyewitness accounts from friends and family, coworkers, and of course warrants for wherever this individual resided. At the same time, the federal government will provide ongoing counseling support to individuals in the community to try to get them not just through this immediate moment, but are going to be very, very difficult weeks and months ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Those weeks and months ahead when everybody leaves tend to be the hardest. Sam, thank you very much. Scott, thank you very much for your reporting. We appreciate it. And still to come on the Takeout, more on that deadly shooting in Minneapolis. Next, we'll speak to a member of this shattered community on how they're dealing with the tragedy.
And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church.
Welcome back. That was Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry at the first press conference following the school shooting in Minneapolis today. Several vigils will take place this evening to honor the victims. Megan Walsh is helping to plan one of them, and she joins me now. She's also the director of the Gun Violence Prevention Law Clinic at the University of Minnesota. Megan, thank you so much for being here. Our thoughts, prayers, all of our feelings are with you in the community. Can you just tell us, first of all, a little bit about this community and how people there are possibly feeling?
Thank you for having me on here. We as a community are already dealing with the horrible loss of our legislators who were killed to political violence not very long ago. And then to wake up and have this news today is completely horrifying for everyone in our communities. My phone is filled with text messages from friends who heard the shots, from people who know loved ones who were shot or know their families. People are wondering what to do. They're wondering how to talk to their children. And it's absolutely a horrible moment for Minnesota today.
And we can't even begin to imagine what everyone is going through there. Thank you for sharing a little bit of that emotion with us. As you mentioned, Minnesota is no stranger to this type of violence. I know you've worked a lot on combating gun violence. I'm wondering what you think would need to be done in light of this.
What we're seeing so far tells us that what weapon was used was likely an assault weapons ban. And as a lawyer, what I know is that the Second Amendment allows regulations and does not prevent everyday use of guns for normal Americans. There are things we can do, one of them being an assault weapons ban. Nearly universally, courts that have addressed these bans have held them to be constitutional.
And I do want to talk a little bit about Minnesota's state laws because they have expanded background checks recently. The governor is a Democrat, and yet this still happened. I'm wondering if there's anything that you see related to some things that have already been put into law.
We don't know much about this shooter's background yet, so we don't know if he would have passed a background check. Currently, Minnesota law allows people as young as 18 to legally purchase an assault weapon. And even if all laws were complied with and he was able to pass a background check, he still was able to perpetrate this mass shooting. He obviously was dealing with a lot of mental health issues, and it was easier for him to access a firearm that killed at least 2 people and led to horrible trauma for everyone else in our community, easier than it was for him to get help. Most mass shooters historically are suicidal, and so it seems that that's exactly what happened here today.
And when we're talking about, children going back to school at this time, I mean, so many parents across the country are kind of dealing with this feeling or fear that is so, profound. Everyone is aware of it. What about when it comes to school safety? Are there measures that you could advocate for when it comes to the schools themselves?
I know this very personally. My youngest daughter had her first day of kindergarten today. So I dropped her off, and months later, I learned about this shooting. Every parent worries about getting a call, like the ones that the parents today from Annunciation got.
Yeah. What can we know about the vigil being planned for tonight?
Today, we are going to be honoring the families of the people who have been shot at Annunciation, and it will be a gathering of community to be together in this moment of pain. But there's a lot more work to do after today. And so what I would say is that I encourage people not just to be involved today, but to think, what can you do tomorrow? What can you do a week from now? Parents do not want these calls coming in. Schools and churches are supposed to be the safest places where children can go. And I do think that schools are doing the best they can. They're trying to enact safety procedures and keep their schools safe. But it really is easy access to firearm laws that are really at the heart of what's causing these problems.
Megan, we will be thinking of this community tonight as you gather for your vigil this evening, and we wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And federal officials are investigating the Minneapolis Catholic school shooting, how President Trump is responding. You're watching The Takeout. And welcome back. President Trump has ordered flags at the White House and at public buildings to be flown at half-staff following the deadly shooting at a Catholic school in Minneapolis. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins me now. Nancy, good to see you. What more have we heard from the president and the administration about this shooting?
Caitlin, it was actually really moving this afternoon, really heartbreaking, actually, to watch the huge flag here on the north lawn of the White House grounds be lowered slowly to half staff, and the president has ordered that all flags on federal property be lowered to half staff through this coming Sunday. He also issued a proclamation a couple of hours ago in respect for the victims of the senseless acts of violence that were perpetrated in Minneapolis this morning. He said he is being briefed regularly by the FBI, and we do anticipate at some point we'll hear from him with a longer statement, either in social media or in person. But for now, most of the federal activity is taking place on the ground in Minneapolis as they assist local law enforcement in this investigation.
And Nancy, we know that President Trump spoke with Governor Walz earlier today. These two are former political rivals, but in the face of tragedy, that tends to go by the wayside. Can you tell us a little bit more about that call?
Sure, it does seem like they set that rivalry aside today. Caitlin, the president offered Governor Walz his condolences. He pledged to give Minnesotans whatever kind of support they need in the midst of this tragedy. And Walz told reporters that he thanked the president for that, and that he had also heard from the attorney general and from the vice president. So the lines of communication between the governor's office in Minnesota and the White House appear to be open right now.
All right, Nancy Cordes, thank you so much for that update. We appreciate it.
You got it.
And the president of the Democratic Mayors Association is responding to the Minneapolis shooting. I spoke with Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb about the tragedy and what should happen next. You're watching The Takeout. And welcome back. We're continuing to follow the Catholic school shooting in Minneapolis that left 2 young children dead and 17 others injured. Earlier today, I spoke with Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb about that tragedy. He's also the head of the Democratic Mayors Association. Take a listen. You are a mayor of a major city. I'm wondering how you as a mayor prepare for something like this senseless tragedy, especially as students are coming back to school?
Nothing can prepare you for that kind of moment, to witness a mass shooting, especially when children of all people are victims, tragic victims of such mass shootings. So my heart goes out to Mayor Fry during this challenging time. I know he is doing the best he can to calm his residents, to work with public safety, to get to the bottom of what happened. But now more than ever, we must all do our part to make sure we keep guns out of the hands of people who should not have them in the first place. And let's keep the family of those victims in our prayers today. But let's also make sure we are doing our part, not just as elected officials, but a broader community to stop this kind of senseless, heinous violence in our country.
And of course, this is something that you hope never befalls your city, your town, your community. But what is your advice to families in Cleveland that are sending their kids to school, that may be thinking about this, especially now?
Well, number one, make sure you always tell your children you love them before they leave, and hug them a little bit tighter, because but for the grace of God, that could have been one of our children or someone in our family. Number two, it's always important to have a game plan for your family in the incidents that there may be a mass shooting happening in your community. And it's just sad. It's just sad that we live in a country right now where this senseless act of violence is happening in our churches, happening in our grocery stores, happening in our malls. This is not how we should be living as a nation. And it's a big reason why I ran for mayor in the first place, because I wanted to be a part of the solution. And so every day, America's mayors are on the front lines working to reduce violent crime, working to get illegal guns off our streets. And it's important that we call the consciousness of our country to question and ask ourselves, why aren't we working to solve this problem? And I think everyone is sick and tired of thoughts and prayers. We need real action, and support. And it's important that we continue to work to do our jobs as elected officials to make sure these kind of tragedies never happen again.
And Mr. Mayor, we had originally had you on to talk about the news of the week, which was the deployment of the National Guard to American cities. I'm wondering, against that backdrop and in the context of yet another mass shooting, what do you make of the argument that cities, schools, communities should be more fortified, should have more security, and perhaps more of a presence of law enforcement?
Let me just say this. As a son of a cop and as someone who's had to bury friends and family members due to violent crime, as a mayor of this great city who continues to meet with victims of gun violence, safety should not be a partisan issue. Being safe to be able to walk to school and go to school, being safe to walk to your place of work or your place of worship is a part of the basic moral contract of society. And we as mayors are doing the hard work every single day to keep our city safe and secure. Since I took office as mayor 3 years ago, we have seen a nearly 47% reduction in homicides. That's progress. And don't get me wrong, one homicide is too many. One shooting is too many. We still have a lot more work to do. But in my opinion, the National Guard is not the solution. And what this president is doing, what this Republican Congress is doing, is they are politicizing this issue and using political theater to distract Americans. And I've seen firsthand what it looks like to have a strong federal partner in the White House to work with me as mayor to keep my city safe. For example, I worked with then the former director of the ATF, Steve Dettelbach, to create the first ever Crime Gun Intelligence Center in Cleveland. And because of that center, we've gotten thousands of illegal guns off our streets and have solved more homicide cases than we've ever solved in our city's history. I work with my police union to boost police pay by over 34%, the largest increase in modern history. And we recognize that our cops can't do it alone. That's why we invested millions of dollars that this administration in the White House just cut funding for, or from rather, in terms of violence prevention programs. And so instead of defunding programs that keep our city safe and secure, we need a president in the White House who's going to partner with America's mayors to keep our city safe, and the National Guard is not the answer.
Ohio is one of the states that sent their National Guard to Washington, D.C. for this deployment. Is there any situation in which you believe that those troops would be better served serving in Cleveland?
Well, I have a great working relationship with our governor, Mike DeWine, and he has been a great partner to me as the mayor of Cleveland to really address our public safety issues. When we had a mass shooting in 2023, he supported me with bringing the Ohio Highway Patrol up to Cleveland to do more violent crime task force reduction details, to do more targeted traffic sweeps to get guns off our streets. But when it comes to the National Guard here in Ohio, I'm assured by the governor that he will not bring the National Guard to Cleveland without my approval, because I believe this governor still believes in home rule, and I still believe in federalism. I believe in a true separation of powers, and I thought the Republican Party believed in federalism, and what we're seeing right now is not the case. Our National Guard should be focused on preparing our cities and states for wildfires, hurricanes, and other forms of natural disasters. This is not the answer.
All right, Mayor Justin Bibb of Cleveland, we thank you very much for your time and your insights and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
And coming up, we head back to Minneapolis for the latest on that deadly shooting and the status of the victims. You're watching The Takeout. And welcome back. Earlier today, a physician from a Minneapolis hospital discussed treating victims of today's deadly shooting, many of whom were children. Let's take a listen.
We are dealing with gunshot wound injuries from apparently a high-velocity weapon. And, gunshot wounds can be very problematic because they can involve multiple body systems. And again, they require a lot of resources to manage.
And Lana Zach joins us now from Minneapolis. Lana, it's great to see you. I know you've been on the scene. What more do we know about these shooting victims, those who survived the attack, and their families?
Hi there, Caitlin. It is awful to be reporting another tragedy like this. They are all so unique in their grief, in the details, but there is also something that is similar, that is a thread that's carried throughout all of them. We do know that an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old will never be coming home to their families, but there is some good news at this point. We have heard that the 14 little children who were delivered to area hospitals are now, at this point, expected to make it. As you know, they have varying levels of gunshot wounds, and as you heard from the doctor, the situation certainly was critical and tense for many of them. And to know that the 14 are expected to survive gives this community just a modicum of comfort in a really tragic moment.
Lana, thank you so much for bringing that to us. That is really good news, as we've been waiting to hear about the condition of those victims. You've been on the ground. I know you've covered, unfortunately, so many of these tragedies, but can you kind of give us a sense of what it's like to be there, what you're seeing and hearing, what this community is possibly going through at this point?
Yeah, and Caitlin, in addition to covering all this, like you, I'm a parent, I'm a mother, and you hear about this in the beginning of school. It's the third day of school here at Annunciation Catholic Church and School, and our own kids are starting school. And for every parent throughout the country, as they hear this news, it hits a part of our hearts directly. And here in the community, that pain is magnified because they know the children who are here. They know the people who worked here, the people who worshiped here. And there is a heaviness that is being carried by everyone in this area. There's going to be a vigil tonight by Moms Demand Action here in Minnesota. They will be recognizing that 8-year-old and the 10-year-old who were killed in the pews as they assembled for morning mass today. And there was something that Governor Walz said, which was that there are no words. There really are no words that are going to add comfort to those families. There are no words that are going to lessen the pain.
And it seems that we have lost Lana. I'm sorry about that, but Isabella Benhumaya joins us now. She is a survivor of the 2018 shooting at a high school in Parkland, Florida, that you may remember had killed 17 people. It's so great to have you here, and thank you for your time and sharing with us. I think when people see the headlines and they see the number of victims, that doesn't account for victims like yourself, those who survived this kind of tragedy. I know it's been 7 years since Parkland. It's something that is kind of seared in our memories, but especially for you. Can you tell us a little bit about what life has been like in those past 7 years, how you have possibly moved on?
Well, I am a survivor of the Parkland shooting, and it has definitely been a hard 7 years, especially seeing how these shootings happen and happen. And I thought the Parkland shooting was going to be one of the last ones, but unfortunately, we have seen a lot of other shootings these years, and it has taken a lot of therapy, a lot of leaning on my family, leaning on God to get through it. And I was 14 when I lived through this shooting. So I was very young, but the kids today are even younger. So I understand what they're going through, and it just makes me frustrated that this keeps on happening even 7 years after Parkland.
You mentioned that even time has passed. It feels kind of right there. What would you tell families today who are going through this right now about how what you went through and how you got to a place where you are now?
I would tell them that it's going to get better. it doesn't feel like right now, like it's going to get better, but it will, with the help of God, with the help of their families, with the help of people that they trust. And I send my deepest condolences to everyone in Minnesota who are grieving right now. And I can just tell them that this is a moment that will change their lives forever. They won't be the same person that they were before. I'm not the same person that I was when I was 14, but it eventually gets better after a lot of working on yourself, after a lot of just leaning on those people who make you feel strong and make you feel happy. And even though it doesn't seem like it could get better right now, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm just praying for all those families.
And Isabella, what is it like for you when you hear this kind of news today of another shooting?
It brings back many memories. It takes me back to 2018 in my English classroom, hiding underneath my desk, hearing gunshots and listening to people cry and yell. And it just takes me back to that moment in the 1200 building of Stoneman Douglas, when I thought it was a drill while I was hiding underneath my desk until I found out it wasn't. And then I ran. I saw blood on the ground. I saw people with gunshot wounds, and I just lived a nightmare. And it just takes me back to that moment. And unfortunately, it has happened so much since Parkland that I am getting used to hearing these news and these reports of new shootings. But every time it happens, it touches my heart and it just reminds me of what it went through and how it's been like for me. And I just feel so much for these families and for everyone who's going through it. So it's just very upsetting and frustrating that it keeps on happening. And I just feel for all those families.
And what do you think people should understand about those who go through this and survive, who may have not been physically harmed, but were there and have unseen harms?
That we may have not been physically harmed, but there is a mark forever in us, in our hearts, in our life. We, as survivors, kind of have like the survival guilt that where we ask ourselves, why did I survive, but the others didn't? For the longest time, thought about why did 17 people have to die in Parkland, but I got to walk away and they didn't.
Mhm.
And it leaves a mark in us forever. It changes our lives forever. We're not the same people that we were once before the shooting. It stays with you every single day, year after year, and it kind of creeps upon you when you least expect it. When you
Mm.
are in college, at work, with your family, it just comes back when you least expect it, and you just keep that trauma with you your whole life. It does get better, but it never completely goes away. So it's something that you never forget.
Well, Isabella, Maya, we really appreciate your time. We don't forget you or any of these victims today. So thank you so much for sharing your story, and our hearts go out to you as well as all of those in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next, we'll bring in our political panel to weigh in on the reaction to today's deadly shooting in Minneapolis. You're watching The Takeout. And welcome back. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar spoke to CBS News Minnesota about the change that she wants to see following the deadly Minneapolis school shooting.
Minnesota is not alone here. This is not about one state. This is about states across the nation that have seen this, and in other countries, when they put certain laws in place, they've actually had better results.
Here with me now, White House correspondent for Semaphore, Shelby Talcott, and White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal, Meredith McGraw. Ladies, great to see you both. Thanks so much for being here. So we've all covered so many of these mass shootings, and unfortunately, they follow kind of a familiar formula where you have the outrage, the cry from lawmakers and other officials for some kind of action on either side. And yet, I'm wondering if you think anything may be different this time, what we may expect from public officials in Washington to this.
I think it remains to be seen. And I think the thing going against the idea that this is going to be the one that drastically changes anything is the fact that we have seen it so many times before. And it does follow a familiar pattern where you have one side arguing about guns, you have another side arguing, in this case, about some of the social issues aspects of this. And so it becomes politicized very quickly. But in the weeks and months following these mass shootings, there is very little actual work done in terms of changing laws on any side of the spectrum that might prevent something like this from happening again.
Yeah, and Meredith, what's the reaction been from the White House? I mean, it was really striking to me to hear the president call Governor Walz. I mean, typically that's what you do, but they were former real political rivals, and he hasn't extended that courtesy to others before.
I mean, that was a heartening moment and something that you hope and expect any political leader would do in a moment like that. They had obviously a bitter rivalry during the presidential campaign, but you know, they spoke on the phone. We don't know the details of that phone call, but we know that throughout the day, the vice president and President Trump were getting updates, and we saw some of the responses from the FBI director and from the DHS secretary as well. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about the investigations that are going on. But to Shelby's point, this is not new territory for any politician, for any of us, unfortunately. And I'm thinking back to President Trump's first term after the Las Vegas shooting, after the Parkland shooting. There were, school safety meetings. The Trump administration had that bump stock ban that was eventually reversed by the Supreme Court. But, there, I'm sure, going to be similar moments of reflection. But the question, of course, is always, will we see anything new happen?
Yeah, that's a really important point, too, how he has been president during these awful tragedies and that there has been some policy to come out of it. I mean, there was also some state-level policy in Florida after Parkland. But Congress is also out of town right now. They don't come back until next week. We know kind of the passage of time is the biggest impediment to any sort of legislation on any topic. So it doesn't feel likely that any sort of momentum around anything could get through. But I'm wondering what this does for the White House's schedule this week. I mean, this kind of all comes against the backdrop of the National Guard having been deployed to D.C. and potentially elsewhere.
Yeah, I think it's an open question still, right? Right now we have the president today with sort of a quieter schedule that was already in place before this shooting happened. And so I think the question that I have is, are we going to hear from the president beyond sort of the statements that he's put out on Truth Social? Are we going to hear from the vice president? Is there going to be a trip planned? Sometimes that happens. Presidents will go visit the site of tragedies. I don't think we know the answers to that yet. And I do think if the president were to take a trip, it would probably be in the days following to give the investigation time. But it is an open question of whether this schedule changes and whether this changes anything in the next few days.
All right, we'll keep an eye. Meredith, Shelby, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And that does it for us today. The Takeout with Major Garrett. I am Caitlin Huey-Burns. We'll have updates on this shooting in Minnesota throughout the night on CBS News 24/7. The Daily Report starts right now.